Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Lion's Den. I'm Edison.
Yo, what's up? I'm Darren.
And we have our special guest.
I'm Angela Knight.
If you're not familiar with Angela, we're going to plug her information down below as well. Her YouTube, Instagram, whatever the case may be, so that way you guys can keep up with the content that she uploads as well. Some of you may actually be able to find value in it. But nonetheless, the biggest and most important thing is getting to know who Angela is. And if you don't already know who she is, trying to figure out basically what the overall goal is here. You'll find that with Angela's approach, you can probably learn a lot more about yourself than you give yourself the opportunity to. But nonetheless, I guess one good question to ask you, Angela, is I want to kind of go outside of like podcasts, stuff like that. So outside of just podcasts, what do you find yourself like passionate about? What do you do outside of like being on camera or being behind a mic or whatever the case may be?
So off camera, for the most part, I like to kind of build the bridges between whether my family and people around me. I think that we don't do enough of the community building. So anything I do, whether it's family business or just relations that I deal with on a daily basis, I think it's important to just kind of, it fulfills me, honestly, to see somebody who's probably like hopeless and having a shit day, shit life, whatever. I interact with them. I'm not saying I'm any like Gandalf or whatever, but I do feel like it's sort of like paying it forward. So with everything I do, it is a challenge, and I hate it sometimes, but it's rewarding to see my family, my friends, my peers happy, shocked, all the above. That's what I personally enjoy doing off camera.
Well, that's good though, because it shows at the end of the day, there's two different sides of a scenario. There's what people see and what people don't see, right? So people can see something, people can watch your videos and automatically draw a conclusion on who you are as a person. And if you're most people, when their thoughts and their ideas are challenged, they'll paint you as a bad person. So that's the case scenario across the board when it comes to a lot of people. So that's why I wanted to know basically, okay, outside of the podcast, you have the things that you do. You have your own life. You know, what are some things you're passionate about, things of that nature. But what I would say is a good question is, because I'm asking this, let me ask you this first. When did you start doing this? When did you start, doing podcasts or uploading content for this type of, I guess, area of topic?
So the topic itself, I've always talked about. I grew up in a nail salon, so I deal with women all day long, and they talk about their issues all day long. So I've been pretty vulnerable and have people that are vulnerable to me, and I always shoot the bull back and forth. And it's always like, bro, why don't you put this on YouTube? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I'm like, well, I do nails. Like, who wants to hear from a nail tech? I don't have any credentials to talk about this stuff. But it works. I was like, okay. COVID happened. We couldn't work. I didn't have anything to do. And it's weird when life is shitty. You I just want to be free. I want to sip pina coladas. I want to retire. And when you finally get it, you realize wow, this is not productive. I don't feel free. I actually feel trapped. I feel stupid. I feel stagnant. I want to be challenged. I also want to talk to other people. So I started uploading videos on YouTube and started talking on TikTok. Actually, it was TikTok first, the easiest platform to grow on. Blew up really fast because I was unhinged for all the right and wrong reasons. And then from there on forward, it was this uphill battle of trying to figure out who I am online. Like, you're learning who you are while you're in front of thousands of other people, millions of other people, but it's a fast one.
Would you say this journey taught you more about yourself than the years prior working at a nail salon and maybe giving advice to some people that, we're talking to you? But would you say this entire journey of having the ability to have some success within your videos, and then let's say, we all have case scenarios where maybe we have content that do very well from the past that you're like, well, maybe my views are a little bit more different now than they were back then. But would you say that whole journey is what taught you the most? If not, what has taught you the most about who you are?
Yeah, this journey for sure, it happened at a crazy velocity. I think ignorant is truly bliss, because I was so ignorant going into it, and I was so passionate that I was talking to anyone and anyone. In the nail space, you see the same people over and over and over and over, so it's like an echo chamber, and no one's really going to challenge me because my family owned the salon. Then I did my own, and everyone's like, oh, I trust Angela. And even people trust you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but nobody challenged me. So the things that I said to people were the same issues perpetuating. But then on the internet, you're different calibers, different spaces, political views, and all that stuff, and going into it, I wasn't ready. I was just kind of being so like, whatever I felt, whatever I saw, I've always been blunt, honest, shoot it out. Didn't really think it further beyond what I usually have to. So you burn, you learn, and then you meet awesome people, and then you burn some old bridges, make some new ones. So within a year, I think I compacted like things that would take someone, like some of my friends who've been in this space for like 12 years. 12 years it took them to learn. And for me, I was like, wow.
Yeah. It's definitely a learning experience. Do you have a...
Oh, no, I was just going to comment, like, just on, you said, I have no experience in working at a nail salon, but I would assume that kind of like builds up experience because you're talking to everybody, you're getting a lot more practical experience than, I don't know, book experience or something like that.
Yeah, so that's what I would say. Like, there's a huge difference between, like, I would say, like, Gen Z is very intellectually smart. They can't figure out how to apply with their intellect into real life. Like, I compare myself to almost like a blue collar worker. Like, I'm very hands-on. I understand how to work with my hands. Back labor wise, I'll throw my back into anything. But like mentality, IQ wise, that's something I developed being in the space because you're not working and busting your back. You're more so using your brain. You have 2 seconds to answer and not screw it up. You have to curse less. You have to make sure that you're thinking beyond what your understanding is. You have to make sure that you cross your T's and dots your I's before, during, and after. In real life, I make a mistake, I go to Home Depot, patch it up, no big deal, nobody knows. Like, it's you learn at your own pace, and nobody penalizes you the way you would in real life. Online, everyone penalizes you even before you even get to. So I
have a question.
Yeah.
As when you work on nails, right? So you like paint them and stuff. Do you ever feel like someone is just blabbing too much about you and you're like, man, I'm not your therapist, let me just do your nails? Or do you actually like, you enjoy it, like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool?
I grew in it. So in the beginning, I hated it in the beginning, but then I started realizing, like, you're a fucking asshole, Ange. Like, you created this space for people to come in, they pay you, they feel safe to tell you these things they don't tell their husband, their family, their mothers, their therapists, and they're telling you. So I took a lot of that experience and used it in the podcast space, and I looked back and realized how wrong that was, because it was technically confidential. I didn't use names or anything, but it was still a vulnerable experience that people told me. And yeah, in technicality, you pay for your nail experience, not a therapy session, but it is a blessing that I've learned from it, because a lot of people trusted me, and I created that space. Like, I feel like it worked. They came home, they were happy, they came back, they were excited. They'd be like, dude, I can't believe this worked. I'm like, I can't believe it worked. I didn't even know it would work myself. I was just kind of using common sense, but it's easier to see people's issues when you're outside of it. And
that's right.
I feel like that's benefit me.
Describe where your passion for relationship and mental health stems from.
Okay, well, first off, I'm a pretty broken-ish person from my background, and so is my whole family. Everyone that is cultured, for the most part, I'm going to speak on culture. I'm pretty sure everyone is. But, like, when you grow up Asian, like, your family, they don't hug you, they don't kiss you, they don't say they love you, they don't say they're proud of you. They only care about academics and scholars. But, like, we grew up in a place where we didn't have the privilege to care about school. It was more so work. And once I started going to high school, my parents were like, hey, we need you to drop out of school, and we need you to work. And I was like, not gonna happen. And it was the first time I challenged their authority, and they were like, well, you're going to listen to us? And I'm like, well, I'm not. So I packed my bags and left like a crazy child at 14.
Oh, wow.
And then ever since then, it was more so like, it was game. Like, I didn't really have room to be like careless. I didn't really have room to be like, oh, we'll just let life come at me and just hope to God people are good for me. I knew that I had to be good. And then I just understood that relations are really important. Anything you do in business, email, texting, phone call, people, it goes a long way with people. So I guess off of like the survival mindset, I had to give a crap about how people felt about me so that I could survive my way and like figure out how to do it without the parents and without the scholar and all that stuff.
Nice. Yeah. That's, like you said, sometimes you have to put yourself in a situation where you're the least comfortable in order to show yourself what you're truly capable of. And in your case scenario was, as a 14-year-old making a bold decision to say, you know what, I'm going to up and leave and be on my own. I'm going to do my own thing. Mm-hmm. Whether you come back home or you don't, it's a matter of, it's a situation like that teaches you about yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not, by any means, I'm not encouraging kids to run away from home, but that's not what you did. Mm-hmm. What you did was you made an agreement with yourself that this is what I want to achieve, and I'm not going to allow somebody to dictate my course or where I end up, because they don't want that for me. And I feel like a big problem in which the reason a lot of people are suffering right now, especially with this entire area of mental health, is because a lot of people are not living lives for themselves. A lot of people live their lives for their parents or somebody else whose approval means the world to them. So a lot of people end up going throughout these courses in life. A lot of people end up doing things in life, not because they want to, but because they think it's the right thing to do, because they think that's what their parents want them to do. And when you live a life that's not really your own, and you live a life for somebody that's not you, it's very easy for you to get depressed. It's very easy for you to feel like, I'm not doing anything. I'm a failure, because everything that I've set out for myself to do, I haven't done. I feel like I'm succeeding, but for my parents, and that leads to a lack of fulfillment. So you saying that and you going through this situation might have been the best step in the right direction for you. Because one thing that it could teach you is I can learn a lot from myself. I can learn a lot through life experiences. So like where you mentioned earlier about, having to develop a lot of book smarts, or where people are like, oh, well, where do you get your credentials from? Where do you get your experience from? Which you hear a lot. But it's just life can teach you a lot more than books could at times.
I think that it's hard to touch on a topic like this, not because it's hard, but I think either way you have to learn both.
Correct.
Whether you start off with the book smart, you either have to learn your street wits after, or you start with the street wits, you have to learn the book smart later. Whether you obey your parents now or you obey them later on in life. I think the extreme of the pendulum of saying, I don't care about what anyone thinks, I'm going to do what I need to do for me, that comes off selfish your entire life. I think that if you don't live for a purpose, that also is an issue. When you're like, I just want to be happy. But happiness without friction, without goals, it ends up being pretty lonely within itself. So like for someone like me, even though I left them and even though I had a lot of resentment at the time, I don't anymore. Because once you kind of do the things you want to do in life and you look back and realize like, wow, it's not that my parents or people in my life didn't want success for me. They were scared that if I failed, they couldn't protect me because their education level stopped at 8th grade. That's something that a lot of people don't see or understand or have empathy. And I'm huge on empathy and compassion, especially where I am now, because I have the power to be a douchebag. But like, does it really make you feel good to bully people who don't have the better means of what you have? So I think that no matter where you are in life, whoever it is, if we focus on communication, building relationship, like if you have to leave your parents' house, you say what you need to say, like, hey, love you guys, you don't understand me, I don't hate you, I just need to do what I need to do. And when I can one day, I'd like to come back and rebuild this. And you're not going to be happy with this decision, but I need to do this for me. And when I can do it for me, I can do it for us. That's a lot to say in a situation where you don't have a pot to piss in, but that's what needs to be said, whether it's now or later on in life, that we don't do. And we hold that resentment, and then we live life hurting other people because our parents hurt us. And that's like, I think one of the issues that I have with people. So yeah.
A lot of people, I feel like they hold anger and resentment towards their parents for how they treated them.
Yeah.
Or the opportunities they took away from her, or whatever the case may be. And I think as a person, you need to understand that this is your parents' first time.
Yeah.
They're new to raising a kid. They're new to, how do I deal with a teenager? How do I do this? How do I survive on my own? They're trying to figure it out just like how you are.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they think that parents are superhumans.
Yeah.
No, they're just like you. They're trying to figure it out. So having an open heart and an open mind is key when it comes to building a relationship. My father had a terrible relationship with his father, and I have a terrible relationship with my father, but we're building it up again. And it's just, you got to understand that, you both are humans walking separate paths. They're just along with each other. You got to be more open to.
It's hard.
It's really hard, but it takes a lot of maturity to realize this person is just like me, just older.
Yep.
Yeah. I think like when people have more responsibilities, like you come to recognize that when you're put into a position, like people think it takes to have kids to understand. It feels like you could become a manager and understand like, holy crap. So I was like, why are you such a bitch? I'm like, I'm not a bitch. I just have to worry about if this doesn't get done, I get in trouble. That's literally how parents feel.
Yeah.
Like if I don't raise you correct, society judges me for this degenerate that I raised, or, dad did all this work and you become a nobody and now we're both nobodies. Like these are things that they themselves don't know how to verbalize, and we judge them for it and we hate them for it. And I don't agree with their methods, but I do recognize where it comes from. And I just have to recognize like, I'm not going to hate you because that's going to affect my outcomes, but I do recognize where we have to differentiate. Yeah. And I think we should talk about these things more and give grace on that so that at least parents know it's worth, raising you and having compassion, understanding, because it's fearful to wonder if the people you love, whether it's your employees, your kids, or your pets, do you love me for taking care of you, or you think it's my job to take care of you? That's like a fearful position to be in, and not everybody has like the bandwidth or the capacity to express that to their kids, and they end up living a life full of burnt relationships because of it. So.
I mean, think about it. It's just a matter of, you know, the way you came up, the way you grew up, and maybe certain relationships that you had. If they weren't in place for you, if things didn't happen the way they happened, you wouldn't be the person you are.
Yeah.
If things didn't happen the way they happened, you wouldn't have the mindset that you have, especially like the no bullshit mindset. Mm-hmm. So the reason you can come off, like you said, there's situations where you have the power to come off as a douchebag, whatever the case may be. But at the same time, it's just a matter of, okay, I may come off as a douchebag, but what's the intent behind it? Is the intent behind it you're coming off as a douchebag because you want to belittle people? No. In your case scenario, you might come off as a douchebag in a sense of trying to help people, or in a sense of trying to give somebody constructive criticism. And the scenario is a lot of people don't take criticism very well. And especially with today's day and age, where if you try to critique somebody, they might take it as an attack. And with the overall scenario in which, like, for example, we spoke about communication and how vital communication is. People struggle to grasp that concept because communicating, typically, if you're at fault for something, if there's a problem at hand, proper communication involves you having to own up to the fact that you might have contributed to something that fucked up. And a lot of people are afraid of that. A lot of people are afraid to be accountable. Mm-hmm. And that's why earlier I said I don't want this to be like a traditional like podcast where we just ask you like a million questions and get you to tell us about your whole life. And it's because what we really want out of this is a discussion.
Right.
We not only want to get to know your side of things, but get to pick your brain a little bit about, your mindset going into relationships, going into communication, what you think the best course of action might be for this new generation that seems to have the most potential and the most resources, but the worst mentality. Mm-hmm. So with that being said as well, I kind of want to go into that too. And one thing I wanted to go into prior to talking about relationships or anything else is this current generation. So I have a brother, and my brother, he's 14. Yeah, he is. Oof. All right, my brother is 14, and he just started high school. And for him, he hasn't had a very good upbringing, I guess you could say. I mean, his relationship with his mom seems to be kind of shaky. They live together, but with all of that being said, what I notice is where he's growing up. I don't know if this is an entire thing when it comes to kids within his age group, but him and my cousin, who are around the same age, I've noticed they have a similar view of things and a similar approach. And that is that depression is a cool thing. Depression is glorified because, and I saw a quote, and it was from my cousin, and I almost wanted to smack him for it. And it was something that said, you need to find yourself a man who's depressed because depressed men give the best dick or something like that. No. And when he posted, I was like, is this really what is being encouraged right now? So are you forcing yourself into a depressive state because of the fact that you think that that's what others want, because of the fact that you think that's what's going to get you all the cool points, whatever the case may be? And it's just, the problem with that is eventually trying to put on an image of depression leads to eventually clinical depression, because you would find that you become, whenever you force yourself to focus on something for an extended period of time, you slowly begin to believe in it. Mm-hmm. So if I focused every single day on looking and acting depressed because I think that people are going to like me more if I'm that way, it won't be long until my outlook on the world is a little bit more negative. And when it comes to mental health, positive relationships are the most influential factor that leads to positive mental health. Mm-hmm. But the same is to be said when it comes to negative relationships. Negative relationships are the most influential factor when it comes to negative mental health. So if you're constantly around negative people, if you're constantly around people that are glorifying and praising the wrong things, it won't be long until you develop that mindset as well. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's not true. You shouldn't your friend shouldn't have to have any control over your mindset. Your relationship with your friend shouldn't have to control anything. But in reality, we don't realize it. Subconsciously, we become who we are based on the relationships that we have. And the reason I say that is if you're in a relationship, let's just say you're in a relationship and your girlfriend, wife, whatever the case may be, is very toxic, very narcissistic, makes you feel like you do nothing. And you live with that. And then for whatever reason, the relationship goes south, you guys split, part ways. The way you act afterward, subconsciously, is going to be predicated on how your relationship went before. And a lot of people, it's either you stay in that mindset or you will get out of that mindset. A lot of people don't know better. A lot of people would leave relationships with narcissistic people, or a lot of people would leave relationships with people that have the worst intent for them and think that that's normal. So I've been noticing this a lot more often when it comes to our generation now, where their mindset is a little bit off when it comes to you have unlimited potential and unlimited resources, but a limited mentality when it comes to what you think is actually attainable. Mm-hmm. What are your views on that?
I think to tap on that, I think comparing it to, I think every generation has its own issues. The older generation was struggling to survive, so you didn't have a privilege to be like this.
Right.
In this generation, a lot of things have been created already. I think there's a lot of pressure. I used to shit on Gen Z like a mofo. I thought it was funny how silly they were. But then I realized I saw a lot of poor parenting, mm-hmm. where when your parents finally can afford to get you an iPad or high-speed internet or whatever the hell it is, you're just so happy that you can afford it. You wish you had that as a kid. You give it to your kids don't work for it. Now your kids are like, oh wow, what am I supposed to do now? There's no goal to accomplish, and I think they struggle with the direction and some sort of goal to achieve, because it's like, why? There's already a Steve Jobs. There's already a Zuckerberg. There's already a Elon. Everything that's so big that it makes them feel small. I've unfortunately seen them glorify depression. It sucks, but I think that's them trying to find their identity, and it makes me question where's the father? Where's a man? Whether it's an uncle, brother, who are you looking up to? What type of content are you consuming? It's little things like that. As much as I don't like the way that they cope, I have to understand that is a cope, that why they're doing that. It's easy to sit here and just be like, I think that's stupid. I think it's extremely stupid. But I've mentored a lot of people that are in that space where I realize you just need to take that anger and just direct it somewhere that will benefit you in the long haul, because people like that are waiting for other people to hold them accountable. You have to hold yourself accountable, because you have to ask yourself, where does this get me 5 to 10 years from now? Nowhere? Okay, let's redirect. Waiting for people to hold you accountable is just barbaric. They don't hold themselves accountable. And that's really where my state of mind is at. And I think people have to learn, everyone in your life is going to be a lesson or a blessing. So if you're waiting for people to, teach you, no, you teach yourself from what you learn from this person. Right. You grow with them or you grow apart from them. And that's really it.
I think a lot of the issue with the younger generation is the impact of social media they have on their lives. Mm-hmm. So for example, social media and also the friends that you hang around with, schools nowadays, everything they're seeing on social media, it can actually, it triggers especially when you're growing, it triggers your brain and you can manipulate your brain. And this is coming from a personal experience. My little sister, she was going to a school, and for some reason her teacher was teaching her about communism and how communism is good, but it's never been executed correctly. So she started thinking, communism is good. And I'm like, well, look at a couple countries and you see it doesn't play out too well. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, she is now this could be a hot take, depending on how you look at it or whatever. She's now saying, oh, I'm lesbian. Oh, I'm pansexual. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm that. And she wholeheartedly believes. So my mom ended up taking her out of the school, took away her phone, kind of put her on the right path of, okay, you're going to focus on learning because your ass is 14 years old. You don't know what the hell you are or what you want. And eventually now it's been about two and a half years, and she's like, what the fuck was I thinking? What was I doing?
Kids model what they see, and if they don't see it, they figure out what the model should be. So it's one extreme or the other. Whether they're modeling what they see, which is to tolerate and to be extreme and to be abusive, cool. And then when they don't have that model, they're okay, I think this is what it means to be a man. I think this is what it feels like to be a woman. And they go to that extreme also. So I'd say it starts with the foundation of home, what you're surrounded by. The social media is always going to be around. Entertainment's always going to be around. I hate when people completely blame it on. Yes, it has an impact, but But I've seen drugs my whole life. I've seen a lot of crazy things. I've never done these things where I'm like, oh my God, I had to do it. Like, no, I know what's bad because I've seen the impact of people around me, what I've done to them. So I hate when people just solely blame it on social media because I think it's brought a lot of great things. I've met a lot of awesome people, done a lot of great business. I think like it's awesome, but also with everything, food tastes good, makes you fat. Alcohol makes you feel good, makes you die. Like things like these where I'm like, stop cherry picking the good and leaving out the bad. Like that's crazy. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And it's ironic because we were talking about that, I believe the other day. We were talking about the impact of the lack of a father figure in the household. And then also on top of that, the impact of social media, the impact of the internet, whatever people have at their disposal. Because the internet could be an amazing tool if you know how to use it properly to your leverage. But the internet can also be your biggest detriment if you don't know how to use it, but you allow it to use you. And the same thing goes, there's another scenario when it comes to like fatherless households. You would notice there's a lot of different scenarios that can occur from something like this. So for example, if a woman grows up in a household where, her father has been absent, they can either grow up to resent men because of the situation that occurred, or they can grow up to seek attention from men because of the situation that occurred, because they didn't get the attention from, a father figure like they wanted to when they were growing up. They didn't get that attention. So they don't know what they should be looking for. They don't know what man is good for them, what man is bad for them, until they experience it through life lessons. And usually these are the most painful lessons. The most expensive lessons you have to learn are the lessons that come from life, because they can cost you a lot. They can cost you your mental health. They can cost you your ability to see things in a certain manner or certain, visual. And within that regards too, it's just like you said, it doesn't only have to be your actual biological father in your life. It can be anybody that you model. Kids model people that are usually older than them, because if they see you doing a certain thing in their mind, they're going to say, okay, that must be the right thing to do. If, let's say, you grow up in a household with a present mother and a father figure, and they have a healthy relationship and they communicate very well, there's a high likelihood that when you grow up, that's what you're going to be looking for in terms of a partner, or looking for in terms of compatibility with somebody, is how is your ability to communicate? And how is your ability to communicate effectively? Because I've seen this before. Versus if you grow up in a toxic household where maybe your father was present, maybe your mother was present, but there was always friction and it was always toxic, and there was never a resolution other than, okay, we're gonna get into a fight, I'm gonna argue with you, and then at the end you're gonna leave and you're not gonna come back for a week, right? Which a lot of people go through. So now in your mind, you're gonna think that's normal. You're gonna allow people to treat you poorly because you think that that's normal, because that's what you've seen growing up. But then again, that doesn't always have to be the case scenario. You can also see that and model it in a different way. Whereas opposed to saying this is normal, you can say, how can I create an environment that's not like this? How can I see this and allow this to be the reason that I make something change or make a difference? And it goes back to like the drug analogy. You grow up around drugs and you see a lot of drugs in your life, but doesn't mean you're going to grow up to be a drug addict. You can be in an environment like, for example, we're in Orlando. In Orlando, we have OBT. In OBT, there's nothing but people shooting up heroin in the back of a store. You can grow up around these people that shoot up heroin nonstop, back to back, every day. Doesn't mean you're going to pick up a needle and inject yourself with heroin eventually. You can see that and be like, wow, how do I not be like them? How can I see somebody else's situation and say, I don't want that for myself? So there's two different sides of a scenario. It's just people pick the destiny, or people pick the destination that they're going. And that goes back, everything ties into relationships, and everything ties into communication, and then mindset. Mindset, relationship, communication all have some form of a correlation with one another, where if they're not properly in check, then it can be potentially damaging. And a lot of people suffer because they don't have the ability to check in with their own emotions either.
Right.
And that's why a lot of people suppress their emotions. And by suppressing it, you usually allow yourself to become more vulnerable in that sense too. And I kind of just went on
No, you're good.
A long time. No, but you're spitting. So it's like you're knocking at one point to another point, and you're just crossing everything.
I'm just saying how they all correlate with each other, because they do in a sense.
Yeah, I think there's 3 pillars in life that people should like wholly just focus on, whether it's learn yourself, and then learn people around you, and then learn your craft. But like I say that lightly, but I made it very heavy. Like you may know how you communicate, but you may not know how somebody else communicates. You may think that I'm communicating, but they're not being receptive. So change the way you communicate. So when you know yourself, you know how you are. You have to realize like maybe that person's not understanding how you speak. It's like babies. They think they're crying and they're saying, hey, I'm hungry, but they're just effing crying. So what does that mean in human language? Mom, learn my body language. Am I hungry? Am I pooping? Am I not comfortable? What is it? We have that gratitude towards kids, but we don't have that towards each other. And I say, like, if you learn yourself, you learn, okay, I like to scream when I'm angry. You like to type when you're angry. Let me kind of meet halfway. And then you learn your craft. I like to text. You like to call, okay? How can I get better at calling since that I love you and I want to work with you? There's a compromise we have to make with the people we love and people we trust. So if you learn yourself, you learn the people, and you learn your craft or what you're really good at, I think there's somewhere that we have to meet, because you always hear people say, I'm communicating, I'm telling you. And it's like, okay, but you're yelling at me. So you lost, the delivery is gone at that point. So I think people don't see that enough, and they say, well, communication is important, but making sure the other person's receptive is also important.
Yeah.
I think communication, if someone, a part of communication is trying to figure out and understand how someone receives communication and process the information. And I think a lot of people today they're lacking the skill of how to communicate, how to talk, how to listen because of texting, right? So you may hear the voice when you're doing voice messages or you FaceTime real quick, but you don't understand the body language. You don't see them, like, you know what I mean? They're feeling small right now. Okay, so maybe I need to ease up or anything like that. So there's a lack of skill, and I think a lot of people today are losing communication. I mean, you could just go outside and you can see people ordering food, and how they order the food, you're like, okay, this person probably stays inside most of the time. Or eye contact. Some people don't know how to actually do eye contact, so they sit there and they're like, okay, I'm supposed to stare at you. Or they kind of look away a lot. It's just a lot of weird things, or you know what I mean? So communication has a giant, like, failing presence, and I think today.
There's
social media.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to it. When people have like Snapchat and all these things, I effing hate it. I don't understand. Why don't we save the conversations for in-person conversations? Because I've been waiting to talk to you all week. I don't want to blow the steam off in little forehead pictures like, what are you doing? What are you doing? How's your day? You're killing it. No. Save up the entire moment when you see the guy or the girl you want to see. I haven't seen, let's say, like a family member. I don't want to like send them a text. Like, no, I want to show up in person. Yeah. So these accessibilities like Snapchat, for example, that's where I'm like, I draw the line there. If you have that, you're wasting your time. Everybody has that. What makes you so special that you have it? If you really want to talk to me, you book a flight, you drive to see me, vice versa, whatever it could be. But sending a little bullshit text, you're normalizing the issue of how we communicate with each other. It's so cold, it's so lame, and it's so bland. I'm like, can we just wait? We wait. We have so many accessibility towards each other that we use it, and then we talk about how saturated the market is when it comes to like relationships. But maybe you've abused it all. Stop using all these stupid. Just because the apps exist doesn't mean you have to, like use it. That's why they say we are the product. Yeah. We're a walking product of all these things that they launch out, and we fail at ourselves and we blame everything else around us.
Yeah, and then I see a lot of people. They're like, oh, my relationship is dull. My relationship is losing its spark. And it's like, okay, why are you texting when they're right next to you? Why do you text constantly while at work? You're constantly doing small talk 24/7 that you lose that nice, valuable, meaningful communication and conversation. So when you get home after working, and you both are like, well, we were talking 24/7 of the day, so what is there to talk about now? And then you go to your friends like, yeah, I don't know, we just don't really talk anymore. We just don't really do this. Our bond, our spark is dying. Well, it's because there's small talk overload in your relationship. Yeah. So that meaningful connection that you had before when you didn't know that person, when you always had something new to talk about, something intriguing to talk about, it feels dull now because all you're doing is small talk.
Well, you set the bar really high. That's why I say when people first date, they go balls to the wall. I'm like, chill out with the bullshit conversation. We don't care about these things.
I got to let them down. 7-Eleven. The bar is low.
So I just think that, like, when I first talk to any person, whether it's like new friends, new people, I'm like, hey guys, like, I'm not a texter. I was like, I'm going to call you or I'm going to show up at your front door. I was like, I know you like to text, but that's not my style. I set the standard right there. And even in relationships, like, I don't want to text all day long. Like, I think that's just like a waste of time. I think I want to talk this over dinner. It'll be worth it. The potency is going to be so much better. And you kind of reprogram people when you have that standard for yourself because they admire you, they like you. They're going to understand, like, yeah, you know what? Why am I on this phone all day long? I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go be productive. And I think it starts with one person recognizing the issue and setting the standard instead of feeling like, this person likes me. I'm going to keep texting them all day long and keep doing it back and forth. And then you get into a relationship 5 years down the line, you're not going to be doing that. And I've desensitized yourself to always talking to that person. And now it's going to feel like there's an empty hole and realizing that, no, it just finally regulated and you don't have anything to bond off of. So, yeah. Well, I think, like, okay, so my thing is, I think, like, historically, like, women were a lot more nurturing and they didn't have to work, but now we kind of have to work.
Yeah, 100%.
With the quality of lifestyle, like, for example, I want my kids in good school. I want my kids not eating GMO food. I want my kids to have a good background, not depend on the government for shitty WIC checks.
True.
So, and on a survival mode, women can stay at home and men could work. But that also brings back to, like, the rate of men being depressed because they have to only protect and provide and go to work. There's nothing there besides just living to provide. So when we say that men should be masculine and dominant, I think everyone should be dominant in their strength. I think everyone should be dominant in whatever the hell they're good at. So when we say, like, men should be masculine, I'm pretty vocal on what I do for work. I would be considered masculine and vocal. But I also know when to be feminine and when I need to do these things. So I think men and women are a lot more closer and similar than we realize. There's a lot of overlap. There may be like a 30% of biological difference, but we still have to recognize, like, we have both traits, feminine and masculine. So if a guy is too macho, he's unrelatable. You're not going to get a girl that she's like, you don't understand. Like, if somebody said on one of my panels where he was like, this sounds like buttercup talk. And I'm like, okay, well then get the fuck out. I was like, because you're going to have a daughter one day and your daughter's going to need that buttercup talk.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking, like, the man has to be a little bit more nurturing because you get to care for the daughter, a boy. Like,
it's a balance. That's why we need both. Like, a guy has to be both masculine and feminine, and the woman has to be both masculine and feminine. Like, it has to be both, because if I have to work, I can't go in and be like, yes, whatever master says. Like,
yeah, because then you just get ran over and you can't really progress.
You can't progress. And, like, I have to also, like during COVID, where my husband couldn't work, I had to work because I'm a 1099er, so I could work wherever, whenever I want. I was the one that was providing. And imagine if I couldn't work, what would have happened to him? But these are things that we don't talk about. There's so many crises that happen. Like, I have to be able to protect him, myself, and the kids one day. So I can't just be like, oh yeah, just leave it all to him. That's a huge amount of pressure on one person to do everything. And what am I doing? Like, kids at 5 years old, they go to daycare, they go to karate, they go to piano. What am I doing? Watching Desperate Housewives? Like, this is so stupid. Like, I like the productivity. That's important. So
I think people change with time. You know, over time, people are going to change to match the times in which they're in. Yeah. The only time where it does become a problem is there is no problem with you fulfilling the role of a masculine person, as long as you understand that you don't have to uphold a certain image in order for people to accept you. There's no issue with you upholding, your traditional roles, I guess you can say, but then at the same time, putting your foot down and at least letting people understand that you're not going to get pushed over. You're not going to be vulnerable. You're not going to be as submissive as some people want. And that's okay. Where the issue truly lies is where nowadays there's a select group of people, of men or incels, that hate women, and women that hate men. There was this whole movement, there's this feminist movement, right? And the feminist movement is supposed to empower women. But then it seems like the meaning of feminism to a select group of women went from being about empowering women to just hating men. But what we fail to realize is men and women work very well collectively. Men and women work very well together versus separate. And what happens is when you have a bunch of men that are trying to compete with women, they become more feminine in regards, because what happens is if I'm a man and my sole focus, I'm going to compete with women. Oh, women suck. Oh, women can't do this. Women can't do that. My sole intent, my sole focus is so driven towards showing why women deserve less, or why women aren't worth shit, or I guess you could say with certain music that you listen to, where they paint women as hoes, sluts. All they do is have women shaking their ass on videos, and that's your image. But women are nothing more than just something to fulfill my intimate desires or something to fulfill my sexual needs. So now you have men that get into relationship just because they want to fulfill a sexual desire or sexual need, but what does that leave them? That leaves them with a void, because that's not truly what they desire. What they desire is a true, genuine connection, but they have everything construed because they don't know what to believe, they don't know what to follow. Women would end up hating men so much to a point where they become overly masculine in certain areas, and they struggle to find relationships because they're overly masculine, and because of the fact that if they feel like they have to give in a little bit, if they feel like they even have to be a slight bit submissive, it goes against their ideas, it goes against their thoughts, and it happens subconsciously. Because once you start to believe something, once you start to live something, everything you do from there is going to be based off of the idea and the image that you put and portrayed in your head. You have a blank canvas and you're painting the image of what you want to see there. And every day you look at this canvas and you say, this is the image I need to uphold. So once something challenges it, or once something kind of shifts the dynamic in which the angle in which you're looking at the canvas, you start to question everything. And that's where the real issue lies. The issue isn't about, oh, men should be more like this and women should be more like this. It's no, at the end of the day, men and women need to understand that there is power in working together collaboratively, as opposed to working against each other, trying to show that one person is worse than the other. Because at the end of the day, without men and women, we wouldn't have men and women. Simple.
Yeah, I think that when there's even our conversation, we kind of all collectively get each other and understand. So there's no friction in the conversation. So you see how there's no goal beyond what we already know.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of how I said, if you have a circle jerk full of men, there's only so much barriers you can bring them. When women start just pulling out and say, I don't want to be part of this conversation and I want to be part of your business, that's a bad thing, because now you have no goals to kind of accomplish with each other. And I think that when we have friction, we accomplish the friction, we accomplish the goal, we realize wow, there is something to understand about each other and work collectively and find our strength and capitalize on that, instead of saying you suck, I'm better, you stay over there, I stay over here. I'm that's not really helping the population of the world and the growth of the society. I think by doing that, you're making women feel like they aren't shit, making men feel like they aren't any better. And I don't know where the issue is going to end and stop, but hopefully conversations like this. But conversations like this don't ever get the light. It always gets it's a slow grow. And it sucks because when creators like you guys create content like this, and some people may get lost, the old me, and I look at other controversial people, and I'm like, their numbers are growing so fast. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. You start second-guessing yourself. Mm-hmm. But in reality, it's no, you're doing it right. You're growing the right way. That's how it's supposed to be. Those people are going fast and then burning fast. Their slope goes down faster than their growth, and I think that's something that we don't talk about enough. And younger people don't get to hear that, because all they see is she's really hot, he's really successful. No, that's a loan. That's a BBL. You're getting fooled. Don't believe that.
PPP loan.
PPP loan.
Yeah, and it's
crazy.
It's people are right now how we're three collectively together. They'll see a situation like this, and they're like, "Oh, if it's a podcast with men and women, I'm assuming they're going against each other about their beliefs." And then it's like you said, you're I feel like there's no friction here. There's no back and forth. There doesn't need to be. But the problem is a lot of people are going to expect that.
Exactly.
A lot of people are going to think that there should be friction because men and women can't have this the same ideas. Men and women can't have the same mentality. That's not possible. Women are this way or men are this way. And that's what they believe. So that's why, if you notice, you look at the mentality of men over time, right? How many men can you truly say have women in their lives that they're genuinely friends with that they don't just want to fuck? Very rarely.
Yeah.
Because if a man's gonna get to know a woman, it's gonna be because I think she has the capacity to fulfill some sexual desire of mine. So now what ends up happening is women are viewed as an object in a sense. Women are sexualized of, oh wow, she looks good. She looks good. She looks like she's a good time. I'm gonna try to get to know her and then try to hit it, right? But you rarely ever see the case scenario in which someone's like, you know what, I want to actually get to genuinely know this person, not to develop an intimate relationship with them, but because I feel like they can provide value in my life and I can provide value in their lives. And if people began to develop this mentality, we would get a lot more shit done versus a lot more shit to complain about. And it's society nowadays, it's where everything is construed is their entire idea is what can we complain about now? what's an issue that we can talk about but never resolve? We were just talking about that off camera. Is people will bring up problems and never find a solution, and it's the same reason why problems stem in relationships. A problem in a relationship will stem because a need is not being met. Whenever needs aren't being met in a relationship, problems occur. And it's the same thing with life. Whenever your needs are not being met in life, problems occur, whether it's problems within yourself in your own little bubble or problems within the people around you. And it's until you actually get to go on this journey of self-discovery and figure out, okay, how can I hold myself accountable for certain situations in my life? You'll never be able to get anything accomplished, because for the entirety of your life, you're going to be pointing fingers at other people. You're going to be like, oh, I'm like this because of women. Oh, I don't have money. I'm broke because the only reason I'm broke is because, if I have money, women are only going to want me because of my money. Or, oh, the only reason, like, for example, you have toxic women that I've said this before, that'll go and brag about the fact that, oh, I'm crazy, men can't handle me. Oh, the reason I'm single is because I can't find a man that can tolerate me for, who I am. And it's not who you are. It's the image that you want to portray of a crazy person. There's no reason to brag about being jealous. There's no reason to brag about being someone that can't be, that struggles to be handled because of the fact that maybe you're narcissistic, maybe you're toxic, or maybe you think the world owes you something. But there's this victimhood mentality that's going on where everybody wants to be a victim of something or another. And I think we spoke about this again off camera, where you would talk about certain situations, certain occasions that occurred in your life. And every time you talk about the things that you went through to get to where you are now, someone always has to say, oh, well, I went through worse. Oh yeah, you live in an impoverished area, or you didn't really have the best upbringing, but I had it worse. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's not a competition to see who got it worse.
Yeah. The thing is that people are selfish. They're selfish, and it's another cope. It's so many layers into why these things happen that I'm like, okay, I don't know how you guys come about solving issues with people, but I stop chasing people to get them, and I stop holding people. It's not my place to hold you accountable. I'm like, I have this idea that I need to help people, that I want to help people, and I'm like, I haven't even finished helping myself yet. Mm-hmm. And I realize when people find you valuable and the things that you achieve and things that you do, because 6 months you're not doing anything on camera, you're doing a lot off camera, whether it's productive or you're wasting your time. So I usually fall under 6 months, and then I work on whatever I need to do in the foundation, the structure that you can't see. And I go back up after 6 months, like, this is what I've worked on for 6 months. Now, what I do from there, that's an experiment to see how people react. And what I've always noticed is I never have to hold people accountable, because they admire what I've done in 6 months. Then they chase after that. How do I get that? That's where you get to set your standards and your goals and what you believe is correct. Because when I hold people accountable, they're like, fuck off. Like, you don't know this and you don't know that. I'm like, well, hear me out. Why? You don't want to hear me out? Fine. So when you work on yourself and you kind of have this superior idea of what you think you are, but what you feel has to match up what you do. Some people feel that way, but it doesn't match up what they do. And I'm like, it all has to make sense. So I think that when people have great things on themselves, other people look up to it and they follow you. But we keep saying, I need to hold him accountable, her accountable. They don't listen to their parents, their friends. You think they're going to listen to you? It's like, why are you patronizing? Just give it up. Take care of yourself. That's the only way, I think, to solve the issues. Because I've met many people who would be like, what is it? Like, I'll go to events where somebody is doing drugs or something, or drinking. I don't drink. But why aren't you doing X, Y, Z? I'm like, oh, it's not my thing. They're like, well, why are you here? I'm like, because I'm here to work. Yeah, I was invited by someone, so. Eventually, their marbles start rolling around like, oh, crap, like, I'm just here drinking and having fun. This person came here for this. Let me see what they're doing, because I want to be part of whatever that little networking crap is. And I think that's when their little hamster brain starts working, because they're being challenged for once in their life instead of being judged.
They're like, wait a minute. I'm actually here to network and expand my contacts and outreach instead of just hanging out at a social club, drinking and seeing I don't know.
But you also don't have to be a douchebag out of this. Some people are mean about it. Like, I never want to come off like, oh, I'm better than anyone. So I'm in the same space as a lot of people. But I notice that if you just kind of treat them as a regular person, but they're like, yo, you should come do that. I'm like, oh no, like, I'm married, I'm boring, it's okay. They're like, what? I could be like, oh no, I'm better than you. I don't want to go. Fuck you. And they're just gonna be like, oh, stuck up brat.
How much do you make? Oh,
yeah. But I always tell people, like, dude, I'm a literal nobody. I just know, like, you're having way more fun than me, and it seems to work out for you. I'm gonna stay over here in my old boring town with people. And it always makes me feel like, wait, it's the fear of missing out. Like, okay, if her life is so boring, why does she want to do this with us or me? I think again, it makes them challenge and break their little echo chamber because, wow, no one's kissing up to this facade for once. That works way better than holding them accountable. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's a waste of your time. They're not going to listen to me. I'm a nobody. So I think there's a different strategy to how you hold other people accountable with your own standards. That's my method.
I never actually thought about it that way.
It's so much better. Smart. It's so effective.
Like, no, I'm gonna go home. I'm just gonna hang out there with my family. It's like,
yeah. Oh, well, can I go hang out with your family?
Yeah, like, what are you doing over there with your family? Like, what's gonna be more fun than this? Like, let me go. Like, it's like, no, man. At least I wait for my kid, bro.
Yeah. You guys ever notice that, like, when you're not as like interactive with certain things, that someone's like, oh, like, Edison's always going home. He doesn't want to hang out with us. But, like, you got to get him out, bro. You got to get him out. They always want to take you out of your den because they want you in this scene that they deemed as fun or successful. Mm-hmm. But, like, deep down, they know, like, well, he really treasures, like, he's a family guy. He's a good person. I want that about him. But if you're a douchebag and you cut them off, they're going to be like, oh, you don't even value me as an individual. But if you say, listen, bro, I'm happy for you. That's just not my lifestyle. Like, I'm happy for you, but I'm gonna stay here, you stay there, but we can get together on the commonality, what we get along with. And it stops there. If you want to further extend this, then we have to meet where I'm happy and growing from, but we can't grow from where you're at. That's empathy, compassion, logic, all in one conversation. And that's how you set some standards. Not telling people that they're fat, stupid, broke, that doesn't work. Their parents tell them that. The society tells them that. They don't need you to tell them that. That's a repetitive method that doesn't work, and I wish this generation understood that. You guys have seen the comment section. Yeah. It doesn't. I don't understand why they think that it doesn't work. So.
It's like, oh, here we go, just another one saying the same old thing.
Yeah.
But the kind of like... spring off of what you said is, let's say, for example, like Edison, he's like, no, I just want to go home. And then the guy, like partying wise, and he's like, why do you always want to go home? How can I find a good girl like you have? What is happening? But they're always out clubbing. They're always out on Tinder. They're like, bro, how did you find such a good relationship? How'd you do this? Yeah. Everyone I meet, it sucks. They don't want to do anything. I can't grow them. They're terrible people. How did you find the one? It's hopeless. And it's like, well, maybe if you keep on looking left and expect to see something behind you, by looking left, like, you're never going to see what's actually behind you unless you turn around and leave the left lane.
Sometimes you got to step out of your zone.
You, that's the thing. While you're looking at where to have fun, people are looking at you like, are you the fun person, or do you have to go look for fun? So when someone looks up to you and they see that, oh, this person is looking and seeking validation, now you're no longer attractive. I think that when you look like you know who you are, you look like you are the fun. Wherever you go, you are the fun. That's when the attraction, men, women, kids, pets, family, mothers look up to that. That it's not exclusive just to like, oh, a girl would find that attractive. Even other men would be like, yo, he's a cool dude. I like that dude. He has great core values.
So one thing I wanted to talk about too, which we were texting about slightly as well, was relationships. Relationships as a situation. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about the dynamic in which people think there is a certain image you have to uphold in relationships. There is a video that is circulating and was circulating that you were in. Oh. And it was, and you know about the video because I reached out to you about it, where a gentleman asked you, you know,
was that here in Miami? Or what?
It's in Fort Lauderdale.
You already know where I'm going with this. Where he was basically asking you, oh, if you're making a certain amount, how much should your man make? And you said if you are making $100,000 a year, you would expect your man to be making the same or more. Can you unpack that a little bit for the people that got triggered by it?
Yeah. So the question's always framed poorly, in my opinion. So basically, it was a hypothetical. Yeah, it was hypothetical, like if you made, because I don't make that amount. I'm poor, guys. So if someone is hypothetically making 100K, the likely chances of you meeting someone within your social bracket, it's going to be more prevalent than meeting someone who's going to be making less than you. Like, so if I'm making 100K, most likely my husband's going to be making the same amount or more. And so he was like, so what if someone made 50K? I'm like, there would be nothing wrong. There was a point in my life where I was making less than that. I was like, so I met people in the same social bracket. Most likely you're going to be dating within the people that you work in the same environment. You're not going to be meeting someone outside of your caliber. If you do, you're doing charity or they're doing charity, because it's not easy to have the same commonalities with how you make your money, with how you do your daily habits. You're not going to meet someone, like, you're going to cross paths with them, but there's nothing to bond off of because you don't understand their lifestyle. You may think it's too much. They may think yours is too simple. That's where I was referring to. I don't think there's anything wrong with dating somebody within the same or less. And I think his point was more so like, oh, but men marry down all the time. Because historically, if we want to go that, historically, yeah, the men had to protect and provide, and he doesn't care how much his girl made. because he had to be the one to bring it all in while she took care of the kids. But in this day and age, we're both going to be working. I don't know a single girl in this day and age that was raised to be just a wife unless she's in the Middle East or something. Every girl that I grew up around was forced to go to school, forced to work at a young age. So we're all making money, and you want me to date somebody who doesn't like have the drive? That doesn't make any sense.
It also has also falls back on standards, because and now it's like society wants you to settle. It's as if they're saying, hey, you're making $100,000 a year, just because you meet a man that makes $30,000 a year doesn't mean you should judge him by his income. But then again, there poses the question, yeah, well, maybe you're not judging him by his income, but what is their standards? Yeah. What are their goals? If they're making $30,000 a year and the first thing they tell you is like, yeah, I'm working my dream job, I want to be here for the next 20, 30 years. Then realistically ask yourself, if I'm making $100,000 a year, there's a high 99.8% chance that the lifestyle I live revolves around the income I make.
Yeah.
So if I get with somebody who's making $30,000 a year, there is a high possibility that lifestyle they live revolves around the income that they make, unless they're poor at money management, in which that can be a detriment to you. Because if now you're the breadwinner, you bring all the money to the table, you have someone that's making $30,000 a year while you make $100,000 a year, and they have poor money management habits, guess what they're going to do? Oh, I could spend all of my money because Angela's going to have more to give me. And now it's like, now you're basically catering to a child.
Yeah.
Now you basically have to, you have to feed him. You have to give him everything that he can't normally get on his own because he's not disciplined enough to go out and get it. And that's where people think you need to settle for their limitations, or people think you need to settle for their excuses and be like, oh, well, yeah, that's just him. And I hear it a lot where, I'll have people in front of me, and one person will be doing better than the other. For example, there will be scenarios in which the wife is the breadwinner. The wife is making $150,000 a year. The husband makes $50,000 a year. And I could see the husband, or can hear the husband asking the wife for certain things. Oh, can you buy us this? Oh, can you go buy us that? The wife's like, oh yeah, it's just his situation. He didn't really grow up the way I did. He didn't really have the same opportunities as me. So that's why he's not making as much as I am. It's like, is that the limiting belief you told yourself and convinced yourself of, or is that actually factual? Because someone in your shoes, growing up in poverty and things of that nature, there's going to be one or two outcomes. You're either going to stay in poverty or you're going to find your way out of poverty. There's no such thing as, oh, my circumstances made me broke. I'm broke because I grew up broke. And it's either a choice you make, unless, God forbid something ever does happen where it's literally and utterly impossible for you to make any source of income on your own, then by all means, yeah, that's an exception. But that's a 1% exception compared to a 99% reality.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the outliers and the minorities when it comes to these types of conversation. Like, again, there's nothing wrong with a wife making more money than a guy, but I think that's like, if you've been in a long relationship and you've established, like, he probably worked the first half of your relationship way more than you did, and now that he's slowing down, your kids are older, and you may be thriving in your strength in your career, there's plenty of women that I know that make more than their husband because they're in a relationship long enough. There's no, like, judgment. But first meeting somebody and getting into a relationship where, if, like, for example, I'm a 1099 type of, like, person, my ex was like a W-2 guy, no shade and hate on him, but for our lifestyle, the way that he viewed work, the way I viewed work was so different, where even though I'm off the clock, I'm still on the clock. I'm still in control of my schedule. For him, he was like, no, like, corporate's not gonna fuck with me. I'm off the clock. I'm like, that doesn't work with me, because with my lifestyle, I'm more responsible. I understand, like, when I need to hustle, when I need to pull back. And for him, it's like, no, I hustle when I'm supposed to hustle, when the clock says I need to, and when the man says I need to. And I'm like, So within that mindset within itself, we don't have any commonalities. We can't grow that way. And that's why that video went sort of viral, because a lot of people felt offended by it. And it sucks because you have people of all different ages, teenagers, young 20s, early 30s, people retired that would watch that. Everyone felt different. Some people understood, and some people felt offended. It just really depends on where you are in life. If that message doesn't apply for you, then it wasn't for you. But a lot of people took it offensive, and it's the internet.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, a relationship, it's going to boil down to this. A relationship needs three essential things. I mean, I call it, there's the 3 C's. So communication, which we touch base on, compatibility, and collaboration. You got to communicate thoroughly, and most importantly, communicate effectively. So you can do a phenomenal job at trying to communicate with your partner, but if your partner refuses to communicate on their own, or your partner refuses to acknowledge any of their wrongdoings and accept accountability, then at that point you start questioning, is this the relationship I want for a long period of time? And then there's the compatibility portion. Are you guys truly compatible with one another? Yes, you guys may feel a moment of bliss when you're together. Maybe you guys feel like you're in love, but over the course of time, is that spark still there? Are you guys still consistent in what you do and what you did in the beginning of the relationship? And is there more friction than there ever is blissfulness, or there ever is peace?
True.
And by all means, a relationship is never going to be peaceful. There's always going to be its ups and downs. It's just a matter of, if the only thing you can bank on is 20% of good memories because 80% of it has been toxic and negative, then why are you still holding on to it?
Right.
And then there's there's the whole illusion of I'm with somebody and I've been with somebody for so long. You have people that have been in a relationship for 10 years, and the only reason they don't leave that relationship, even though they know they should, is because they're afraid of losing memories. They're afraid of the fact that if they leave somebody, then all those memories are gone. But it can be the worst relationship where you're losing a bit of yourself to try and keep somebody else going. And it's I guess you could say where the collaboration part comes into play would be as a jointed, couple, as a man and a woman, whatever the case may be, whatever your preference is, collaboration is going to be essential to any success in a relationship. Being able to collaborate with one another effectively can get a lot more done than being, against one another. Or, for example, if you have an opinion, I have an opposing opinion, and we just leave it at that without trying to figure out where we can find the happy median area and be like, okay, that's the best course of action. Then it's going to be hard to maintain a lasting relationship. So collaboration is key. You and your partner need to be able to effectively collaborate with one another to get things done and solve problems, as opposed to being against each other and pointing fingers when problem arises, because it's an inevitable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard of you guys are familiar with oxytocin, right?
Yeah.
You familiar with vasopressin also? No. That's the one where the society loses everyone at. So that's why I think this is a really important, this is one of my favorite things to bring up, actually. Everyone talks about how women bond. If we understood a couple of things, the biology and the chemical of how we bond with each other, the pair bonding with men and women, we only ever understand women bond when they have released oxytocin from pleasure and being happy, whether it's with a child, with a pet, with their husband. We never understand how men chemically bond with women. They always think it's just through, ejaculating. I'm like, no, actually not that, because the minute you ejaculate, everything goes down, postpartum nut comes in. So the question is, how do we maintain that? And I think that if we talked more about what the brain releases for men, which is the vasopressin, when you share small goals with each other and you complete them, which is why men have such strong relationships with each other in sports and in building work, anything like that, because you guys have a small goal and it turns into a big goal, and you share it and you create it and you succeed it. But when you can't succeed the goal, you turns into depression. If you have things pent up in you, it gets weird. Things in here gets weird. Relationship between a man and woman, we can't share a goal together, and she doesn't share something with you. There's nothing to bond up, because the minute you have sex, you release, everything goes down. It's okay, done, completed. What's next? We're humans. We're supposed to find things to complete and accomplish together. The more you bond with each other, the more you accomplish things together, the better the relationship. And I'm like, why don't we talk more about how that affects relationships, instead of just saying you guys just need to get along, but how? Because the same way that things that make me happy, it won't make you happy, but we have to complement each other to get along. And right. If people talked about how that affects if a woman, one of my good customers, I told her, have you told your husband thank you so much for helping with brushing your daughter's hair or taking the trash out? She's like, why is that relevant? She's like, we just have to do our job. I'm like, just doing your job and not knowing if you're appreciated is the quickest way to end a relationship, because he's helping you. It's not within him to do that, but he's doing it because he sees you do it. So if you say, hey babe, I really appreciate when you do that, I think that's awesome that you're helping brush Lila's hair, that's so cool. Well, cool, thanks. I'm gonna do her hair again tomorrow, because you're congratulating on something he's doing with a small shared goal. And right. He's like, I should keep doing this then. That's how, the opposite sex will bond.
Dang, I was gonna talk about that pure thing, like literally almost everything you said except for like the chemical bonding. I was like, okay, well, I guess that's the reason why. But I was literally going to talk about. I was like, well, there goes that. But it's literally proven where positive reinforcement is better than negative reinforcement. So if you ask them, hey, are you able to take out the trash? Take out the trash. Oh, thank you so much. You know, they're like, okay, I'm gonna do it again. You like it when I do that. Versus when, why don't you just take out the fucking trash?
Right.
You're a fucking piece of shit. And then
That's
it's like,
communication.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna do it, right?
People are like, I communicated. I told you to get the trash. No, but you didn't say when he did a good job at taking the trash out.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It'll keep him going. Like if that's the same with like little kids. That's why like when women have kids, that's where the relationship falls out with their husband because you bond so. You see the kids are receptive towards your hug, your breast milk, your words, your tone. You're like, oh my god, I love this so much because you're bonding with the kid. And then the husband's like, well, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. Because until the husband can tell the son to throw a football or baseball, he can't bond with the kid. And that's where I'm like, do we not see this right now? It's not because he hates you. He doesn't know how to bond with the child.
Right.
He doesn't know how to bond with you because you're going through the depression after having a kid. It's all these things where I'm like, we need to talk about these things. Like these generalizations aren't helping the internet.
Yeah, it's and that's a very good point. I could tell you were having that moment where it was like, oh shit, yeah, this and that, but it's true. I mean, people have a natural reward system.
Yeah.
People like to be rewarded for their good deeds, and that allows them to continue doing good deeds. In a sense, you could say it's the inner dog in us, the inner pet in us. Where we're like, if a dog does something good, if you tell your dog to sit and they sit, you give them a treat. Now, guess what? Every time you tell them to sit, they're going to sit down because they expect a treat. Eventually, it becomes so ingrained in them that they just do it every time you tell them without expecting anything. And it's the same scenario in which, like, for example, if I'm in a relationship and I'm arguing with my significant other, and a lot of people have a bad tendency of doing this, some people do it without even thinking about it. And let's say I come in and I'm a little bit late. I'm a little bit late for dinner, whatever the case may be. We had plans, and I worked a little bit overtime, and now I'm late. And my partner, I come in and they're like, oh, you're always late. You're never on time. You never want to do anything with me. Saying certain terms like you always, you never, and certain things like that, it's in a sense, it's a very toxic thing to do subconsciously that we don't realize we're doing. No. Because when you tell somebody, oh, you're always late. Oh, you never do this, or you're never on time. You're basically, in a sense, you're basically telling somebody that they don't have the capacity to do something otherwise. That they're not able to fix whatever problem they have. You're convincing them that they have a problem. And if instead you change that to being, oh, well, listen, I understand you had to work a little bit overtime today. Do we still have time to do or make those arrangements that we've made? If not, how can we reschedule it to where it fits both of our schedules a little bit better? Yeah. But as soon as you say that, people are like, oh, well, that's like a fairy tale. That never happens. If your mindset is that communicating is a fairy tale, then you're never going to communicate.
Yeah. And the thing, everybody has a broken foundation when we first get together. And I think like somebody is going to have to change that. Like if a girl says like, you're always like late, I think it's up to the guy to be like, hey, I don't like when you say that. Well, what do you want me to say then? That's when you sit there like, hey, we have our bad days. You can just ask me, hey, babe, like, can I ask you what took you so long? Like, is everything okay today? You're a little off. Ask me. Don't assume, because the assumptions are where, like, the relationships go bad at, because you don't know the type of day I've had. I don't know the type of day you had. Like, my relationship, there's days where I have a shit day and I still have to cook. Now, if I'm holding my shit together and he comes home, slam the doors, pushing things around, being a douchebag, I'm going to be frustrated. It's important to be like, hey, babe, I had a rough day today, nothing personal. I'm like, don't worry. Just kick your feet up, I'll turn the AC down, we'll put some football on, you'll be fine. Now I'm more understanding towards the situation instead of me assuming like you're just taking it out on me, even though I had a bad day also. So I think people have to like recognize like we need better prescriptors and how to actually handle these situations instead of saying like that shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case, but it's happening. How do we prevent it? How do we stop it? How do we break it? How do we create a new cycle? Whether he notices or she notices it, somebody has to recognize it and break it, or it's just going to be a perpetuating issue. And it's all on like, well, we should, we couldn't, but what if? Like, we can prevent all these things. We just have to talk about it. And that's why when guys say, we don't need to talk about it, we just need to do it. Okay, if you work at a job for 10 years and you don't open your mouth for a raise, you're not going to get an effing raise. We know that for work, but you don't know that for a relationship? That doesn't make any effing sense to me. I don't understand like when we're going to start adding these things up. Yeah, and it's you speak up, you get. If you don't speak up, you're never going to get what you want. Yeah. And most importantly, it's not about being like speaking up and saying, oh, give me this or give me that. There's better ways of going about getting what you want without having to demand what you want. Yeah. But most importantly, there's other ways of demanding what you want without being a dick. And when it boils down to it, it's just a matter of
one effective communication, as you mentioned, is like if you come home and you're in a shitty mood, don't just come home and be like, you know what, silent treatment, that's it. I'm not going to talk to anybody. If my spouse wants to know what's going on with me, I'm not even going to talk to them about what's going on. I'm just going to ignore them, blow them off, because that's what's going to happen, especially for women. If I'm a man, I walk home and let's say if you're my partner and you notice that I'm not talking, you're trying to engage in a conversation, I'm blowing you off, you're not going to think something happened to me.
Right.
You're going to think that there's something happening between us.
Yeah.
You're going to think, what did I do wrong? What did I do to make you make you feel this way towards me? Or are you trying to leave me? Whatever the case may be. Whenever it's like genuine connection, you don't have to cater to each other 24/7 and be like basically handcuffed to one another 24/7 in order for that connection to be there and that spark to be alive. And I feel like a lot of people misunderstand that, and a lot of people don't realize how crucial that is in a relationship, where you guys can actually genuinely enjoy each other's company, and you guys are genuinely loyal to one another to the point where even if you're not home for a few days, even if you're not home for a month, you have faith and confidence and trust in your partner, or most importantly, faith that you know when you come back home, nothing's going to be different. And it's where so everybody, whether people realize it or they don't, everybody enters a relationship to fulfill a need. People have physical needs. Physical needs are like infant-like needs, where they need security, they need to feel like they're safe, they need food, things like that. Those are infant-like needs, but they're physical. Psychological needs, people have a tendency of needing intimacy, needing to have that sense of affiliation, attachment, and certain areas in which they're getting their psychological needs met. People have social needs where they're in a relationship or they're with somebody because these social needs mean they get to achieve a social position or a status, or it opens them to opportunities. And then there's people that go into a relationship for more like spiritual needs. So basically these spiritual needs is I want to have a sense of being, or I want to feel like I have a purpose in a relationship. Either way, people have needs when it comes to going into a relationship. And I feel like the biggest part where most people are missing and where most people are struggling and why they can't find a lasting relationship is they never stop and ask themselves, what are my needs? If you truly actually, and I did this exercise with you, where I asked you, you're in a relationship right now. And I asked Darren, I said, what are your needs? Like, what do you actually desire in a relationship? He couldn't answer. And I said, okay, so here's a scenario. A lot of people are in a relationship and they don't know what their own needs are, but they expect their significant other to fully understand what their needs are right off the bat. And a similar occasion occurs within, you ask yourself the question of how many people in your life, how many of your loved ones do you believe have a firm understanding of what your needs are? And studies will show most people report 3 or less people that they actually genuinely believe have an understanding of their needs. And that's because when you don't understand what your needs are yourself, you can't expect others to. And most importantly, if you don't understand what your needs are, you are less likely to do things to fulfill those needs, but you're more likely to do something because you feel like it's the right thing to do. So in a better sense, when it comes to your relationship, your marriage, right? So when it comes to your marriage, what is one thing that you would say has helped your marriage remain and be so successful?
To not have this idea that it's always going to be fairy tales. Like, I think that who you are when you first get together is not who you're going to be 5-10 years down the line. So I think that I never sit here and compare like, oh my God, we used to have more time to do this. Okay, back then we didn't have this much responsibilities. Back then we didn't think about the future. I do recognize like everything's a sacrifice, and like moving forward, it's not just about us, it's about our kids. It's going to be our family. And about ourselves and how we're going to be taken care of. So I don't ever compare like the disadvantages and the advantages that we have. I also recognize like my childhood and how it shaped me as a person and how it affects him and how I could change it and how it affects him also. I think that we never look at our roots to see like how we cope. Like I used to be an over people pleaser to compensate for like my environment. Like if you grew up in like a violent household, for example, I grew up in that, and I wanted to make sure people were always happy because I didn't want to escalate any issue. And And for a long time, that would piss him off because he wanted me to have an opinion. He would want me to contribute to the thought and the relationship. He was like, if I wanted to date someone who didn't have an opinion, I'd go date some dumb broad. He was like, I like you because of your work ethic, but I feel like you're not expressing yourself to where we could grow. He's like, I feel like I'm making all the decisions, and sometimes I don't know what I'm doing either. He's like, it'd be nice if you had an input so we can kind of banter and bounce ideas off of each other. I asked myself, like, why am I like this? Like, why do I keep taking L's for people and for myself and not get what I want? And I think people need to figure out who you are and why you are that way, and if that's affecting yourself and other people. And my flaws were affecting us, and I had to ask myself, like, all right, we are together, but I need to fix me first so we can get along. And even himself, because I was taking the initiative to fix myself while having somebody, instead of saying, we need to break up so I can fix myself. That's so stupid. Like, no, if you have a company, you need to fire everybody just to be a better boss. You need to learn how to work with your employees. So I think keeping him and me keeping myself, saying, you know what, thank you for bearing with this. I say it all the time. Like, thank you for putting up the old version of me because I was unhinged and barbaric and frustrating, but there was an element in me that he couldn't find from other people that he loved. So one thing that I had kept him there, but it doesn't mean that it was going to be tolerable forever. So I recognize the advantages I have at that point, and moving forward, I always say thank you for this, thank you for that, thank you for this. And it keeps him feeling like, all right, it's worth moving forward in the future. And because he likes that about me, he also adapts that, because he used to be one who didn't talk about his emotions. He didn't talk about what needed to be said. He would just work. And then he would punish me about how angry he would get. But now I realize, like, okay, the anger comes from what? From you being frustrated. Like, people cope in many ways, and we have to ask ourselves, why are they coping this way? Why the needle? Why the drugs? Why the weed? Why the yelling? Why the trash TV? That's a cope. All of it is a cope. Why is there so much leisure time instead of product time, being productive? You have to ask yourself, why don't they feel the necessity to get up and do these things? Because the person next to you should make you feel like, wow, she's productive, I'm productive. He's productive, I'm productive. I wake up early, he wakes up early. I go to bed early, he does. I go to gym, he does. Like, that's how it's supposed to be. And if you don't have the influence over the person next to you, it's questionable if that's even your partner. It's just someone who's just leeching off of you. So that's what works for me. Sorry, long tangent.
No, that's a good point. I mean, you touch base on everything that not only work for you, but might help work for others too, because other people are in situations. I try to think about that when I say these things, because I know, like, some people could say, like, whenever I talk about any of these things, oh, you're just lucky. I'm not lucky. I was in a shitty relationship before. I was in a relationship with him in the beginning. It was terrible. But the first couple of arguments we would have, he'd call me the B word. He said terrible things to me because he was surrounded by women like that. His exes were all Latinas, and his mom and his sister were always, like, running their mouth. He was raised by women. I was raised by men. So I was more so like, you're not going to call me a bitch, and I'm not going to argue with you. And he was like, well, you're not going to argue, so you don't love me. And I was like, no, I'm not going to argue with you because this is something we need to talk about. I'm like, so every time you raise your voice or call me this, I'm going to leave the room until you learn how to communicate with me. Eventually, you have to ask yourself, if I leave the room and you don't care, then I'm clearly just a side piece. But if you do love somebody, you do recognize the value in them, you start realizing, like, we need to talk about this. I'm like, well, then don't yell. He's like, well, what if I tell you and you don't like it, but then that's my fault if I don't like what you say. But at the same time, you're being disrespectful, then you're just being a douchebag. Like, man to man, if you guys talk to each other and you're disrespectful, you're not going to hear each other out. But if you're like good criticism, constructive criticism, you're willing to listen to them. I was like, so give me constructive criticism that benefit you and me. But if you're just saying, like, I don't like the way your hair falls out of the house, I'm sorry, let me just shave my fucking head then, bro. Like, it's a stupid criticism.
Yeah.
But just say, like, you don't like how I put my socks on the ground. Oh, I'm sorry. He's like, because I clean up after you all the time. Oh, my bad, bro. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it was annoying. I got used to living by myself. Constructive criticism. So.
Yeah. But regardless, I mean, constructive criticism is only going to go as far as the other person that's receiving it will allow it to go. Yeah. Whether you take it as criticism or an attack. Narcissistic people have a tendency of taking criticism as an attack, so they'll usually go back and forth with you and act like you're going at it with them. There's some scenarios and some people that you really just can't help because, you know, that takes us back to the whole analogy of women thinking that they have to fix men or men thinking that they have to fix women. There's no fixing one another when you're both adults. When you're both adults, it's not, you're not going in somewhere to fix somebody. You're going into a relationship to grow with somebody. Yeah. And if within that growth, that person becomes better, more mature, and is able to reason better, then that's what they gain from the relationship and from the from the growth. Yeah. However, going into a relationship and seeing somebody that's constantly, putting themselves out there, has no respect for themselves, and your thought is, damn, she's bad as fuck. Oh yeah, I could change her. Oh yeah, she's a, she goes to parties every single night. She throws her ass everywhere for everybody to see. But I could change her. It's just, okay, you're going into the relationship for one, the wrong reason, because your desire, if she's putting herself out there that way, there's a high likelihood that your desire is sexually driven. And secondly, thinking that you can change somebody is the quickest and easiest way for you to get hurt. Because when you have that expectation of, I'm going to go into a relationship and fix them, and then you're in the relationship and you realize that they haven't changed, now all of a sudden you're going to be like, wow, like what's wrong with me, or what am I doing wrong? And people have a tendency of, they think that they have this power to do something when maybe it's far out of their reach. So they stress over the things that they have no control over, and they ignore the things they actually do have control of, which you have control over who you choose to be your partner. You have no control over what your partner does. If your partner if your partner is not open-minded, doesn't want to grow and learn, you can't change them. They have to make that initiative within themselves to change themselves. And then you also have the contrary, which is men and the lack of wanting to show emotion. A lot of where effective communication comes from is when you're capable of displaying your true emotions, or at least communicating your emotions. Going back to that panel, a lot of people were saying, being emotional is not masculine. Showing emotions is not a masculine thing to do. I'm just going to deal with my problems on my own. I'm just going to sit in my car and, blast music and get stressed out in my car. And when I go inside and not talk to anybody. And then here's what they throw around. They're like, oh, it's just me being stoic. Oh, I'm stoic. So when I'm stoic, I don't talk about my emotions. But in reality, being stoic doesn't mean to conceal your emotions. Being stoic means you know how to manage your emotions. So when you're stoic, you can manage your emotions, not conceal them. When you conceal them, you just show that you're not fully capable of understanding and acknowledging your emotions to work on it, but you're going to suppress it because you think that that's the right thing to do. But as I spoke about earlier, if I go home to my fiance and I tell her, and the first thing I do is I walk in and I ignore her, act like she doesn't exist. I go straight to my room and I do whatever I need to do to be a man and uphold this image. She's not going to think, wow, he's having a bad day. Let me give him a massage. Let me cook for him. Let me see what's going on. Let me put on a movie or something. Instead, she's going to be like, what's going on? And if I say, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. It's nothing. I don't want to talk about it. Then she's going to be like, okay, well, what the fuck did I do? What did I do? Like, is it with me, or, do you not love me anymore? And then some men are going to get frustrated by that and be like, oh, why the fuck do you always think it's about you? It's not about you. It's I have shit going on. It's like, okay, but if you said that from the get-go, from the moment you walked into the door, it would have never spiraled into an argument like it is now. So it goes back to the point of, people think that other people need to read them in a relationship. Yeah. But if you don't understand your own needs, how can you expect other people to know your needs? And how can you expect other people to know what you're going through if you never vocally express what you're going through and how you're feeling in the current state?
Yeah, and that's why I kind of think it's important to, when you get into a relationship, not to just jump the gun and take action off of lust, but to actually sit down and figure out, okay, hey, do we have the same values? Do we have the same core foundation within each other? Yeah, you guys might like separate things, but if you have that same core foundation, then you can build together on it and grow upon it. So if you know communication is a big value to you, you're like, hey, I'm big on the communication. It's like, well, I don't really know how to communicate. I was never taught how to communicate. I never learned how to effectively communicate. You can actually kind of like grow and balance, so you're not into this doomed relationship from the beginning. For example, like some relationships, the woman may feel, hey, my husband, my boyfriend isn't as affectionate as he was before. Maybe it's how I look, maybe it's how this, but it could be he's going through something which then affects her self-image on herself, or whatever the case scenario may be. But if you just talk and be like, hey, like, what's going on? Why I feel like you're not giving me enough affection. And maybe the guy doesn't know what your affection is, what kind of affection you want to receive. Maybe his way of showing you affection is a different way of how you want to receive affection. So it just comes, communication is so important.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to what you guys, highlighting both what you guys were saying. Like, we have to just study our partners and people around us. Like, some people show love from action of like cooking or cleaning or hugging. People show love from verbiage. People show love from so many different ways. You have to learn your partner. But I think we also put too much emphasis on who deserves that type of love. Like, I think anyone in your life that is around you should have some sort of, how to say, like, equal love, in a sense where I don't treat anyone more special than anyone else. That sounds absolutely crazy. My husband has a little more than everyone else, but for the most part, I don't try to say, like, oh, you deserve this type of love. I treat them the way that I would treat if I was going into a relationship with them, and I notice that it has more healthier growth than saying, you're just a friend, it limits right here. I don't need to talk to you as much. And I noticed that when you treat people as if you would treat them like one in a relationship, they kind of recognize, like, oh, wow, if I was in a relationship with this person, this is how I would navigate through this, instead of saying, like, oh, they're just a friend, we don't have to talk about this. Because you hear guys all the time say, like, women don't care about men's emotions. How can I care about your emotions if you don't even acknowledge that you have emotions? At the same time, why would a woman respect a man's emotion if other men don't respect other men's emotions? Because it doesn't exist. So this is like a circular talking point where I'm like, if you would just treat everyone as if you were going into a relationship with them, it would be healthier. Because, like, at that point, you kind of hold like a healthy standard of like what all the things you need to be in a relationship should be equivalent to any relationship in your life, whether it's a relationship with your employees, your best friends, your mom, your father, your aunts. They all deserve the same type of love, which is like fairness, communication, reciprocation, all these things where I'm like, why do we limit that just because we're not sleeping with them? That doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
Yeah, there's a difference between like romantic relationship, sibling relationship, friend relationship, acquaintance relationship, but the one main common denominator is that one word, relationship.
Emotions are something, they're very strong signals. So people wonder, why do emotions matter? Emotions matter because of relationships, right? You know, emotions matter especially in relationships because emotions are signals to approach or avoid. So if we see somebody, we base our decision to approach somebody based off their body language, their vocal tones, and the way they carry themselves, etc., right? But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of the way you carry your emotions, the way you bottle your emotions. If you carry it like a baggage that's over your shoulder that weighs a ton, people are going to be more than likely hesitant to approach you. People are going to be more likely to not want to have a conversation with you because they're afraid that you might lash out at them. You can see somebody from a mile away and know, I'm not going to approach that person. That person seems like a dick. That person seems like a douche. This person seems like they're disrespectful or they're too into themselves. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, whether we realize or we don't, whether we're body language experts or we're not, our mind automatically picks up on these tiny little signals from other people on whether or not it's worth approaching them or it's not. Mm-hmm. So then you go into the decision making. Decision making plays a huge role when it comes to emotions. Mm-hmm. Because guess what? When you're experiencing a high level of stress, when you're in a state of distress, then it's your body enters fight or flight. So your defense mechanisms kick in, your survival instincts kick in. And what ends up occurring is when you're in a high level of stress and you can't deal with your emotions properly, because of the fact that you enter fight or flight mode, it disables your ability to learn things. Mm-hmm. So when it disables your ability to learn things, if I'm in the heat of a moment, if we're in an argument right now, and I'm under a lot of distress because of the argument we're in, I'm less likely to learn anything from our conversation because I'm going to be more on the attack. I'm going to be more on, okay, how can I protect myself and attack back at the same time? Mm-hmm. And that's because I'm in survival mode. But if I put my emotions and I understand where my emotions are coming from, and I ask myself the simple question of, how am I feeling right now? How is this conversation making me feel? And I remember that it's nothing more than just a discussion with a point that we're trying to get to. I'm going to be like, all right, let me relax. Let me breathe a little bit. Let me just remember what's going on and check in with my own emotions and let me respond accordingly. Right. But a lot of people don't do that. Once people are heated, they don't think that there's a way to decrease the level of heat that's currently burning within them, of wanting to go back and forth. And I know you've experienced it a lot because you go on a lot of podcasts or you're on a lot of panels where people get heated and all they want to do is lash out at you. Yeah. All they want to do is degrade you or talk down on you. And that's a situation which they don't have any emotional control.
Well, I think the simplest way in my brain to process like the importance of emotions. Emotions are the bond to a transactional relationship. Every relationship you have with most people is transactional. But
Right.
when there's emotions involved, you do things beyond the transactions. Like, I care about you if you hurt me. I care about you if you're yelling at me. So let's bring this down to the level. A stranger yells at me. I'm like, there's no emotions. So you're yelling at me, I'm going to retract and pull back, or I'm going to curse
Right.
back at you. But with someone that you love because there's emotional attachment to it, you're more likely to give them some sort of lead room. Like, okay, let's figure out the root of why you're yelling right now, because this is not normal for you. And also, it's random for someone that you love to randomly yell at you. Strangers, I don't know their backstory. I don't know if they're always getting used to just being neglected and they're taking it out on me. I have no backstory on that. But with my husband and my family, they never yell at me. So if they yell at me, they must have been saying something and I must have been ignoring it. So why did it get here? I have the right to get mad, or I have the right to be like, let's figure out the root of this right now, because there's emotions involved. I love you, I care for you, so I'm not going to penalize you. But stranger, I'm penalizing the hell out of you because you don't know me, you don't got to yell at me. Which is why emotions are important to those around you and those that you want in your life. And that's when people demonize it. I'm like, that's why you have shitty relationships. Like, you go and never practice the muscle of relationships with your friends, or the mail lady, the grocery boy. You never say how awesome they are with their job, but then you go and be like, I want the best intimate relationship. How? You haven't practiced a healthy relationship in your life with your mother, yourself, or anybody, and you think you're going to have a great intimate relationship? It starts with those around you, and nobody ever works on that shit. And then we have no more community. We have no more village. You don't even say hi to the mailman. You look at them crazy when they do things like in New York and stuff. When I go, and even Miami, everyone just looks at you, and they're just like, well, that's just how it is. So you're normalizing these unhealthy behaviors. Because in other small countries and other small states, everyone's, howdy neighbor, how's it going? Yeah, good day, or yibbity doo. And it's like, because they're freaking happy.
It's like North Dakota.
There was there's someone I know, he used to live in New York, and he said when he first moved to Florida, and he went outside and someone held the door open for him, he was like, what the fuck is going on here? Am I going to get robbed?
Caveman behavior.
His neighbor goes, hey, how's it going? Welcome in. He's like, what is happening? What is this? Like, it's so confusing.
And I used to look up to those. I used to look up to those type of behaviors because I was in hustle mode and hustle culture. And I'm like, we got to do what you got to do to get the bread on the table, to get the food on the table. But then you get out of that starvation mode and you realize that's not healthy. When you have kids, you have family, it's not healthy to be like, I'm going to say thank you. I'm from New York. That's not healthy. I had someone from New York and they do that to me. And I'm like, you're normalizing being an asshole. You do realize that, right? Because you're so like hell-bent on hustling to pay your ridiculous rent that you don't think human courtesy or decency is important. That's why I hate New York. That's why I hate Miami. Because they don't care about these things that do matter. Like, I pay for the food and the experience, not just for the food. Why don't you throw my food on my table because you should be lucky to be in Miami? That's stupid.
Right. And a lot of people don't realize that you encounter certain people in your life, and at the end of the day, you never know who you have in front of you. Yeah. You never know if someone that's in front of you can change your life. People also hold grudges for no reason. I can hold a grudge against you and treat every woman that I see like shit because of something Angela did to me, right? But like when I was telling you earlier, him and I have a very unique story of how we met and how we became business partners, and now we did what we're doing now. Him and I met in middle school, but we didn't meet in a great way. Him and I had class together, 2 classes together, and I was actually his bully in middle school. So I bullied him for the way he dressed, the way he looked, this, that, and the third. I grew up in a poor family, and I grew up in poverty. So when I saw him, I saw someone that was potentially probably poor too. So what I did was, to make myself feel better, I picked on him. I used to say he wore Salvation Army shoes. I used to say all this shit to him. And then I used to call him random shit like sausage finger or stuff like that. But nonetheless, over the course of time, he actually ended up wearing a new pair of shoes, and he was so happy about it. He went up to me and said, Edison, look at my shoes. And at that moment, it's like something clicked, and I was like, this guy genuinely wants to be my friend. I'm like, I feel bad. So fast forward to high school, he's my only friend, and he's the only person that I actually talk to consistently that then became my business partner. And till this day right now, he's the only person that's consistently been, in a, like, as close as he is to me compared to anybody else that I thought I was going to be closer with. And it's just, you never know who's in front of you. You never know what significance someone can have in your life until you allow yourself to get to know somebody. And that's where all of this maturity, all of these emotions and relationships are going to come into play.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that's why people say, like, certain places they'd go to, be like, I had a shitty experience here. I'm like, no, not me. They're like, why am I? Because I treat people with human decency. Like, just because someone's I don't know, the bag boy or the bus boy, it doesn't mean you treat them like shit. And it doesn't mean that I'm being charitable by being nice to them. It's just because they're humans. You don't know what type of day they're having. I get shit service all the time. But sometimes just breaking that ice right there, that cycle of just like, hey, thank you so much for the service. Like when someone's like, oh, I'm late, don't worry about it, don't stress about it. They need to hear that because they're used to people telling them to hurry up. So when you break that cycle, you're breaking the issue, and you are the voice of reason. I think that's so important to be that person instead of saying, I'm entitled to this service, I'm entitled to this moment right now. And I'm like, it doesn't really help when you're that way. And I think people should be more like that. So I think that's great that you kind of took in what he did there. So you changed.
There was a good portion that he kind of left out. He used to be really into like boxing, and so he's like, yo, come over, let's box. I'm not a fighter. And then he...
Oh, yeah. So I was like, you know what? I might be able to train this guy. So whenever I invited someone to my house to train, the first thing I would do is we'll put on the gloves and I'll see if you could fight. Usually I used to do that to beat on people. And I was whooping his ass in the beginning. And then at some point I said, you know what? You know, he's a fat white kid. He's not going to hit me hard. So I let him hit me and he rocked me. And then after that, I was like, okay, I respect this guy. So... I took him. I was like, you know, I'm gonna take him under my wing. I'm gonna train him how to fight, and we're gonna go fight some people. And you know, that's what happened. And then I realized, well, you know what? Maybe that's not the best approach. Maybe we shouldn't be like fighting everybody.
See what happens when you have compassion and complementary relationships.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, it helped each other out. And I mean, I know we keep going on a tangent here. So that way, before this shuts off again, do you guys have any like closing statements that you guys want to put out there for anybody viewing?
So my name's Angela Knight. My YouTube right now is dead. I'm killing my current channel for anyone that needs to know. I'm building my new YouTube channel, but I'm doing it healthy, and I don't want to share my links because I learned. It screws up the algorithm when you do that. You have to let people find you organically, especially if you want to build a healthier crowd. You share the link, you screw up your algorithm. I didn't know these things.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to find me, Angela Knight on Instagram. It's probably the most stable platform I have at the moment. And yeah, that's me. And hopefully this was a decent conversation for you guys. And thank you for having me today at the Lion's Den.
Anything you want to say?
For me, I hope this conversation probably helped somebody out there. I'm not asking to help 5 million people. I don't want to help 5 million people, but if I just at least help one person in any aspect, I mean, it's great. And I love having actual discussions with people. So yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and hope you learned something and gained some value out of this.
It could be a